antitrust is all the more required that the products on which it bears have less substitutes, which is the antitrust symmetry of what Susan Scotchmare had to say about intellectual protection. And one of the immediate corollary, if I go on speaking in mathematical terms, one of the immediate corollaries is that you shouldn't patent any part of a human body, especially genes and proteins. They are by excellence something that you cannot bypass and you cannot substitute. Well, every day is not. Because the system which has evolved from the 80s is now characterized by almost the opposite of what I said about the traditional system. Almost everything gets a patent. Nobody checks whether it's a marginal contribution or an important contribution. Many times, a party which is not the actual inventor gets a patent. I will give a concrete example in a minute. New subject matters, as people in the offices say, new subject matters are introduced, which in the traditional legal tradition, which I repeat has been vindicated by economic analysis, that traditional approach. Well, new subject matters that would never have been thought of as being patentable are just patented now. Even mathematical algorithms. Recently, somebody working at Microsoft asked for a patent on a computerized method that was devised by Darwin to identify lines of evolution. Of course, Darwin had a computer, but it's not enough to computerize something essential which had been in existence for a century. And the most breaths are given in a way which is really exactly the opposite of what Scotchmare recommends. For people who claim for a patent, they ask for a large patent. And what is amazing is that the office granting the patent tend to give even larger, for reasons I will quickly discuss in a moment. And now I come to my example to show how things work really. At the end of the 80s, a biochemist in Berkeley identified a gene in our body which has the very important property that when it mutates, you know that a gene can remain the gene it should be, but it can also mutate. That gene, when it mutates, creates a much bigger chance for a woman to get breast cancer. So it was important. But Berkeley was not terribly rich at the time, and they had not in the labs the sequencing machines which would have allowed the biochemist to exactly determine the DNA sequence of a gene. Sequencing in bio language is determining the chain of molecules that make up the DNA. Of course, if you have that chain, you know more about its improvement, more about the gene. But basically, the discovery was the discovery of that lady at Berkeley. But she couldn't go just for financial reasons. She couldn't go to the last step of her discovery. Myriad Genetics, a startup at Salt Lake City, could. They had a very good network of informators, so they knew quickly about the discovery, and they also had the state-of-the-art sequence sheets. Sequenced, they went to USPTO, and they asked for a patent. 2 years later, biochemists at the famous Cambridge laboratory, where the genome was, DNA was discovered, they discovered another gene, the mutation of which have the same effect. And it happens that if you have mutations of the two genes, the effect is cumulative. It's a question then of 60% more chance to get breast cancer. They had no sequencing machine. It seems that they just didn't think of having one. They were very glad with the result. They published, and the people at Salt Lake City sequenced and went for a second patent to the patent office. And at the patent office, of course, they proved that from that knowledge they could devise tests. If they were able to do that. It's not trivial, but it's not very difficult when you have the right knowledge. So they asked for patents on the tests, and they asked also for patents on the genes themselves, and they were granted both. Which illustrates two things. Somebody who is not, let's say, the principal inventor might get the only patent on the discovery or on the invention in the present system. And second, the patent granted was so large that nobody could develop any other test, because, of course, the other tests would be based on the knowledge of the genes, and the genes have been granted, if I may say so, have been granted to Myriad Genetics, which means that all the applications were their property, and even more, anything which might be discovered later on these genes, any property completely unknown when they got the patents, was also their property. That gives you an idea of I would say, perversion that the system has had in the last 30 years. That was the position, that was the opinion last week of a judge, the district judge in New York, which had to rule about complaints of patients and doctors about this situation. And he decided that, contrary to the habit in this country, the patents should be broken. Of course, you will have appeals. It might go to a Supreme Court. It might still be a long way. Nobody knows what we'll get on that. But it's significant that, for the first time, a very well-known, very spectacular patent on in biochemistry and on application to medicine is considered by a judge as being contrary to the basic principles of incentives to innovation and to invention. I will give you just one testimony about how the situation is